Hi, everybody. Welcome to the TPF podcast. My name is Kris Simonich. My partner here is Andrea Floyd. And on this podcast, we attempt to deconstruct, dissect some of the best practices from our industry's top performers. Today, we have co-founder of Bloomin Blinds, Kelsey Stuart. Kelsey, welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate it, guys. So happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you. Kelsey, let's start off the conversation. So Bloomin Blinds is a family-owned business. Give us a little bit more of the background, the origin. How did this come about, and then how did you decide to franchise it?
I don't know that I have enough time to cover it all. This is like to unpack it all would be like a giant Oprah Winfrey interview. But it's kind of like that classic like little business that grew into a big business, that thing that we all hope becomes part of our journey. And we were fortunate enough to kind of live that out. Mom started this. She's a serial entrepreneur. This is not the first business she started. And she ran it for years by herself up in Seattle, Washington, one-woman show. Then divorce, she wandered out of town. She moved to Dallas, and within a couple of years, and started Bloomin Blinds back up. Within a couple of years, my brothers and I jumped in, and we were just kind of like this, mom and the boys kind of family business. No grandiose plans, just a way to not work for somebody else. In the long run, we quietly grew to one of the larger window covering companies in Dallas. We knew we had something special. And so we decided to franchise it in 2014, having no idea what that meant. Like when we started franchising, we literally thought, bring them in for training, give them a shirt, they'll send you money forever. And that's about as much as we knew, to be completely transparent. Over the course of the last 9 years, we have learned what it means to be a good franchisor, the responsibility of it, the legalities behind it, the way to set owners up for success. And so we've learned through hard knocks and trial and repetition. But since 2014 to now, had a good run. We've got 81 families that have trusted us, and we're slowly sprinkling ourselves across the U.S.
That's great. That's great. I mean, that's what happens with all emerging brands, right? You have to figure it out and have the ability to pivot and change. And I think that's really important and what people should be looking for in a franchisor.
Yeah,
that's great. Thanks for that.
So to be clear, Bloomin Blinds, you do window covering, installation, and repair. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So why were you so successful before 2014, and why are your franchisings doing so well now? What makes you different than other franchises, but also just the mom and pop independent competitors? They're in every market.
Yeah, no doubt. There are absolutely competitors in every market on the sales and install side. I'd say from a very tactical standpoint, from a widget that we deliver to the customer, one of the differentiation points is the fact that we do repairs. 99.9% of all blind companies only sell new product. If something goes wrong, they'll contact the factory and you got to deal with that. Or if the dog chews on it, I'm sorry, you got to buy a new product. And when mom started this whole thing, it started off as blind cleaning and blind repairs, and we didn't even sell blinds for the first 3 years. So somehow we ended up on the maintenance side of things and kind of learned how to do that. And we've learned that window coverings are pretty generic so that we can carry parts with us and put them on the kitchen counter and fix them in one visit. And that's always been a differentiator, kind of the concept, like, who would you rather buy your stuff from? Someone who only sells or someone who sells and repairs? On top of that, we've always been a very value add mentality as a family. And so we don't treat ourselves as just a commodity. We're not just a product and a price. We are a service that happens to come with a product. And that also is different from the way that the industry typically works. You sprinkle in a little bit of technology and kind of getting ahead of the curve and the guy, with a pencil behind his ear, and you're adding value left and right between the repairs, the ownership mentality, and then, more tech for the same price. So those have been kind of a very quick summarization of where we are different a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. And so you sort of have two business models in one, as Kris and so you have both the repair side, the installation side. Does that come with challenges, having kind of two separate business models? Where do they work together, or is it a benefit to your franchisees?
Oh, I think there's a huge benefit. I think you see that in a lot of different industries. Like the guy that cleans my pool sells me equipment when the pump goes out. The dealership has a garage, so you're hanging out for an hour while you get your oil changed, and sometimes you walk out with a new car. In home service, there's two holy grail rules. A, answer the phone. B, get over the front door threshold. And so this allows us to get into more homes. 40% of our business last year started as repair appointments. And we're not a bait and switch, I'll fix it. But while we're there, customers are often like, hey, since you're here, can I get a quote for this or that? And it's just getting in the house. So this ability gets us more opportunities. It allows us to penetrate a crowded market because there's very few repair competitors. I can rank page one, day one in any given city because I have these repair terms with no competition. The value add of, we're repair. But the repairs themselves are pretty simple. Like these are very simple machines and it's a very visual process. I take this one out, it looks like this, and I put that one in and it looks just like it. So I can just change them out. They're like giant Legos. So it's definitely not a hindrance in terms of like too technical. And that's, you're running different businesses. They complement each other really, really well.
Yeah, and that sort of, additional revenue source coming from that, where someone's also, I don't know how many times someone shows up to my house and I'm like, oh, while you're here, do you do that? So it's your point, just getting in the door gives you that ability to pick up that additional revenue.
Yeah, those words make us drool like Pavlov's dog.
Yeah, I bet. That's great.
Kelsey, walk me through, what does it look like to start a Bloomin Blinds franchise? Are you looking for owner-operators? Can I be more of a general manager and start one step removed? And either way, what's a day in the life of a franchise owner look like in that first year or two?
Yeah, important question. We kind of carry 3 business models, and the owners get to choose their path, right? So you have your classic owner-operator guy in a truck. I want to buy myself my own job. And that's okay. Those are my roots. Like we grew up that way. So I get those people and those are my people. I have what I will call my favorite model, which is the ambitious or scalable owner operator. And that's someone who's willing to get in the van to learn the industry, to understand what it is to do it at a high level. But the intention is to lead with that knowledge and build a team, but they've got context and they've got authority on the subject because they've been there and done that. And then you have that kind of semi-absentee. A friend of mine used the term semi-involved. I think I like that term a lot better than semi-absentee.
It's a good one.
And that one I'm a little hesitant. We're not a giant business. Like we're not kicking out millions of revenue in the first couple of years. And so the overhead that comes with that can be problematic if you don't have the runway for it. And we're transparent about this. So if you have the risk tolerance, if you have the capital available, and very importantly, you have skill set in leading a team from afar. There has to be a managerial skill set here to take on this semi-involved role from our perspective. If you're just an IT person, you've been staring at a screen for 10 years, you have a bunch of money in your 401k and you want to treat us like a stock, I'm not going to award that franchise. But if you're engaged and you have leadership skills and you have that runway, okay, now we can talk about it, but we're going to make sure we're really clear about expectations. So we've got options for everybody. It's just which path do you want to pick?
Yeah. So let's stick with owner operator then for now. What's that look like day to day? And specifically for me, what I'm wondering, in addition to everything you're going to tell us, do I have to be handy, and do I have to have a design eye? Like, am I going to be consulting with the homeowners, telling them what I think looks good? Because for a guy like me, that might be a little bit intimidating. So talk to me about what's really necessary to do well in this business.
Yeah. And the design element and the handy element are the 2 first objections by far and away. Okay. So the owner operator's wearing all the hats. So they're in the van and they're typically involved in sales, install, and repair because the van is a rolling business. Like everything can be done out of that van. From a handy level, genuinely, if you can put together an IKEA dresser, you have already done something more complicated than what we do every day.
All right.
So I definitely don't need handy people. There's got to be some level, like you've had to have touched a power drill before you come on board as a franchise owner, but I don't need a 20-year carpenter. From a design level, we tend to pick out the design last. We tend to focus on the functionality of the product and how it matches your need for what you want it to do. I want it to be dark in here. I want it to get out of the way. I want insulation properties. We often focus on the main driver of it way before we get into the what color should it be. So the color is actually the last thing we pick. So there is a design element, but we're no interior designer. We are not design first. We're function first. And that kind of helps people navigate through this and kind of funnel down choices so that it's not so much of a cosmetic. It's here's the function, and then these colors happen to be available. And that seems to simplify it and streamline it quite a bit. Day in the life, we're a big fan of the owners doing all the work. So we're not one of those window covering brands that's going to advise that you subcontract everything out. In doing so, subcontractors take at least a third of your profits. And it's really hard to grow a business when you're giving away that much money for work that's not all that difficult. And so, between the kissing babies and shaking hands, you're also jumping from house to house or business to business, and you're fixing it, you're selling it, or you're installing it. And then you just repeat and replicate that process until you get to a point where you may want to jump into a second van or a third van.
So this is definitely more of a hands-on. So there's some blind companies out there where they're more focused on the design aspect of it, right? And sometimes it's a little bit sexier for maybe a woman coming in saying, "Oh, I love design. I like HGTV."
Yeah.
Who's your typical franchisee? Is it, somebody who's just really handy? And is it men and women? Somebody who just really wants to fix stuff?
Well, right now the system's 90% men, 10% women. Not by design, just seems to be who's attracted to us. And I think the install and repair side of that kind of, drives that demographic. Of the individuals that are attracted to Bloomin, some of it is the problem solving, puzzling, tinkering kind of mentalities. There's a lot of that, a lot of the if this, then that, problem solving. It is someone who has a little bit of creativity. It's not always on the design side, but they just might have like this little bit of creative itch where they like to play with different things all the time. Because we definitely have a lot of different products and we don't do the same thing every day. But generally, we spend a lot of time talking to candidates who like to be presenters and teachers and sharers of education. Our customers and the general public don't really know much about window coverings. And even after like day one out of training, as little as you do know at that point, you still know more than your customers. And so someone who likes to be the authority in the room and share information and watch people's lights turn on behind the scenes, that's far more important to us than the mechanical skills. The people skill set is really where the thing is lost, or won and lost. Someone buys a salesperson way before they buy the product. And we focus on that quite a bit. And those personable sharers of education are the ones that seem to really be resonated, those people.
Got it. So earlier you mentioned, you made a reference to shaking hands and kissing babies, right? So talk to me about, if I'm a franchise owner, how am I getting customers or even leads, and what's Bloomin Blinds do for me, or what's done, digitally or whatever. And then what do I need to do? Because I'm sure it's not kick my feet up on the desk and wait for the phone to ring and a bunch of appointments come, right? So give us a realistic picture of what that's really going to take to build a business here.
Okay. So on the franchisee side, that's the community involvement. And that's probably no different than building any regular business that isn't e-commerce, right? It's getting involved in the community. From our standpoint, we make a lot of headway in the relational environments. So your B&I or your networking groups are a really good resource for us. Getting involved in the trade shows that come to town, like a home and garden show, those are always big hits for us. sponsoring various events, festivals, any way that you can get your name out in the community and begin to drive those relationships, because we're looking for referral partners. We're looking for realtors and home builders and interior designers, window replacement companies, maid services. All these groups are people that touch homes for a living and are opportunities for us. And we're going to collect, we get asked about pool guys and landscapers. And so we're trading leads back and forth, frankly. But you've got to establish those relationships first. On the digital side, that's where we pick up a lot of the heavyweight. So from the website to the SEO to the PPC, and even like a proprietary AI cold calling agent. Like we have a tool that will go out and start relationships with realtors, with home builders, and it kind of bridges that awkward cold calling gap that all of us face every single day. So we built out tools to handle all the digital side. That's managed for you. There's a budget that you have to put toward local marketing, but the lifting of how to do it effectively and how to continually improve the results, that's all set up on our side.
So Kelsey, tell me, so oftentimes we'll say to clients, you should be, working on the business, not in the business. It's a little bit different. You're saying, I want somebody involved in the business, being that day-to-day. They're doing the repairs, they're doing the sales aspect, they're networking. There's a lot of different pieces. How do you scale that business if you're everything?
It can be a challenge. That is one of the harder parts of being an owner operator. I think for those that want to scale, I think one of the most important things they can do is break that owner operator, one person in a van scenario. Like that's probably the most important step, even just from a mentality standpoint. At some point, you have to grow the business or be able to invest the money where you can put someone else in a van to take some of that day-to-day activity off your shoulders. So in our case, you've got an individual who's doing the majority of the installs and the majority of the repairs, and that frees you up to do the sales calls and the networking. There's no magic recipe to it. It's just one of those kind of grow till you burst. In business, you either build it or you buy it. So you're either going to build the business up to the point where you're at a critical mass and you have to grow and you have the money to do it because you've grown, or you have the capital where you can forward invest in that growth and you can go buy those resources and advantages before the business has gotten there. But I don't want to pretend like we have some magic recipe. There's just a grind process that goes into business ownership and getting through these transitional stages.
Yeah, depending on how you start it.
Yeah, the one piece I can say about Bloomin, though, is we've done that. Before we founded the franchise, we had a team of 10. We were a $3 million a year operation. My brothers and I literally built this thing from the ground up before we franchised. And so we're very interactive with the owners and walking them through those stages. So there's a lot to do, but they don't have to figure out what to do. We can lay out the roadmap and walk with them and forecast, hey, 6 months from now, you need to be prepared for this. And there's a lot of that hand-holding in how we interact with the owners so that it's not a mystery, it's just a lot to do.
Yeah. Kelsey, you mentioned earlier regarding marketing that you have some AI baked into starting conversations so it's not a cold call. And I'll be honest, when I think of window coverings, I don't think of high tech. But you are disabusing me of that notion before the podcast, and you've got some cool things. So maybe the hardest part of your podcast here, I need you to explain what you guys got going on AI wise, and I need you to explain it in a way that at least I can understand it. And then I'm sure everybody else will be able to understand it too.
Yeah. And I appreciate you bringing it up. So this is a touchy subject because AI has become such a buzzword. It's just it gets used generically, but there are different levels of sophistication. So ultimately, the brothers and I, we all agree that AI is part of our future and probably a significant part of our future. And we are very much the guys that would rather be on the front of the train than the back of the train. And so in doing so, we have jumped into a project where we're literally building our own AI. This is a system that we own. We're not renting it from somebody. This isn't subscription based. This is a system that only knows Bloomin Blinds data. We've got 6 years of all of our transactions, all of our marketing wins and losses, all of the customer demographics, and it's being put into what's called a data lake. So when our system needs information, it's only going inside our system. It's not going out to the World Wide Web. And that's affecting a lot of different things. So from a marketing standpoint, we're able to use that AI and all these wins and losses to predict how to get more over like audiences we haven't met yet. We're in test markets. We're starting to see some really significant advantages and more leads and much lower costs. It's not in the FDD, so I'm not going to give out numbers, but significant. It's able to watch those campaigns 24/7 versus a marketing company that checks on them once a week. And it's far more sensitive to data than the human eye is. From a operational standpoint, if our franchise owners are in the living room and they're having a conversation with a homeowner about, I want it dark, but I want to control it with my phone, like the system is listening to this conversation and it's populating products that fit that conversation before the technician even pushes any buttons. And it's really valuable for employees and for new owners because it takes a while to get good at this. We have a lot of little nuances to learn. And so if I can prop up an employee or an owner to look like an expert way before their experience would normally get them there, that's going to convert. That's going to help owners feel more confident to pick them. There's a handful of these tools that are being built purpose specific for Bloomin Blinds. The system is being built for our system. We don't have to bend our business to fit into an existing software. So this is a custom build that we own and that we're designing to fit Bloomin Blinds specifically. And it's all AI from front to back. So it's learning and getting smarter as it goes every single day. It's way more complicated than that, but that's my attempt at abbreviating.
No,
I think that worked, Kris, right? That didn't confuse us too much. I think that was good.
I got it.
No, I think it's good looking for different ways to keep expanding on your business and make it something that's really going to support your franchisees. So that's really helpful. Thanks for that.
Yep.
Kelsey, this is kind of a point in the podcast where we like to ask you kind of rapid fire questions that are more general on franchising, not particularly about, Bloomin Blinds, but, think about a franchisee coming in, someone who's contemplating buying a franchise. What's something you would tell them?
This is actually one of the more important questions I think that could be asked. People can learn about Bloomin, through an FDD or articles or whatever. I think franchising itself requires a gut check, and it requires a good, significant self-evaluation out of a candidate, because there's a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit that's required to start a business. But if you're going to go into franchising, you have to kind of evaluate how much of that entrepreneurial spirit controls your actions, your thoughts, your desires, because there's a proven system. There's a framework, guardrails, if you will. And if you are genuinely an entrepreneur, like if you're just someone who really doesn't like other people's rules, like franchising is not the best model for you. Maybe business is, but not franchising. And you got to really gut check yourself to say, how much do I, when I look at a system, do I look at it as a pillar of strength, or do I look at it as a limitation of my personal freedoms? And you hand me a square, I'm going to turn it into a circle just to see if I can. I would not be a great franchisee. I'm great as a franchisor, but not as a Z. And where I've got owners who appreciate systems and processes, and that's like standing on the shoulders of giants for them. They love that. And you got to know that about yourself before you head into the franchising space.
Yeah, so important. So important. I think that's really great. And so one more question for you. If there's one thing you could tell someone who's a new franchisee in their first year of business, what would that be?
Oh God, there's probably a handful of them. I think you need to lean into your support structure within a franchise network. Especially if you've never been in business before, a franchise done right is just a training and support organization. That's what they should be. That's hopefully what they're offering for you. But most of us have learned that people don't want advice until they ask for it. And so most franchisors are not going to push the help on you. They're not going to call you out of the blue and say, hey, I know how to help and make this better, until you raise your hand and say, I'm coachable. That's certainly how we work here. if you tell me you're coachable, I'll move any mountain, any distance. But if you don't raise your hand and let us know that you're listening or willing to listen, I'm going to spend my time on the ones that have. And when you're early, like lean into that. Let go of your pride. I find pride is such a deterioration of what could be if you don't ask for help, if you don't say, I don't even know what I need, I just want to get better. There's lots of ways to do it, but you got to lean into that system. And if you don't, you're not getting the full value of why you should be there in the first place.
That's great. Really great advice. Kelsey, thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's great to hear about a business like yours where, I think people thinking about it would think, oh, it's just some, home design type business. But really where you're coming at this is you have multiple different revenue streams. You have the repair side, you have the install of new blinds, but then you're really pulling in the tech piece too. So you're kind of hitting on that person that likes to roll up their sleeves, get in, be a little bit creative, and then also has that desire to continue to see the business grow and a little bit of that tech savvy. So I think really finding that right candidate for your business is really important. So I've learned a lot about this. I'm sure Kris has as well. So for those of you thinking about franchising, remember that while there's no one size fits all, the perfect franchise is definitely out there for you. To explore your options, visit theperfectfranchise.com and click on Let's Talk to schedule a call with one of the consultants on the Perfect Franchise team. We look forward to connecting with you on the next episode.